Once upon a time, there was a little boy, and I'm going to do it with my mom's accent, named Kwaku. Every day, he would go to school and try to behave and be focused. But he was very curious, a little bored, and could not stop talking during class. One day, years later, he realized that the thing that he would always get in trouble for, being curious and always chatting with his classmates, were gifts, not flaws. Because of that, he started to find ways to incorporate these gifts into the different jobs that he had. Because of that, he eventually tried to use these gifts to help differentiate himself from other people who had similar jobs to his. Until he finally realized that these gifts in itself, those were actually a job. And ever since that day, he's tried to use these gifts to make connections and help other people.
Welcome to A Life Worth Working, a podcast about how we get to the soul of work. We're your hosts, Dana Allen Walsh and Michelle Weise. I'm a senior pastor of a progressive church, and Michelle is an education and workforce strategist.
And in this episode, we chat with Kwaku Aning, who leads Retro-Futurism Consulting. Kwaku and I met back in 2001. We were both teaching at a charter school in Harlem, New York. I was teaching second grade. I had no idea what I was doing.
None of us knew what we were doing, so it's not just you.
I was an emergency hire. Their second grade teacher quit 2 weeks before school was about to start, and I just happened to be looking for a job. But I just was straight out of college, no idea what I was doing. And I had 20 rambunctious kids who all had behavioral issues except for maybe 2 of them. And at a certain point, I would just be yelling, sit down, quiet, it wasn't working. And every once in a while, Kwaku would come in and he would basically chastise them all for me. And they would just be sitting straight as a board, listening to Kwaku. And then as soon as he would leave, it would be like
back to chaos.
Chaos again. But we also experienced 9/11 together. We were in New York. We were in the same building. It was actually Kwaku came in and sort of whispered in my ear, something terrible has happened.
Wow.
You should go out and make some phone calls and I'll take over. It was an intensely weird introduction to New York for me, at least.
Yes.
That was your first year?
I was there for 2 weeks and then 9/11 happened.
Wow.
And to contextualize that, now we're like, we got the alert on our phone. We saw the video. None of that existed.
No.
We didn't
have access to TV in the building.
Mm-mm.
Right.
So
right. And no personal phones.
We didn't see it.
Right.
No, we had phones, but it didn't have the amount of media that it has on it now. So it's just like parents are just slowly starting to come get their kids.
Wow.
And we know we've heard.
Mm-hmm.
We're so far uptown, we didn't see.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was crazy.
Wow.
So, Kwaku, when you're talking about your sort of larger story and realizing that these things that, that they were ultimately gifts and that they could ultimately be a job, what led you, as you think about what you do now, how do you explain what you do now? And how did you kind of find your way there?
So when I was 15, I wanted to be a first baseman for the New York Mets. And that wasn't going to happen because I couldn't even make that position on my high school baseball team. So I don't know if I really had a sense of what my trajectory was. I think at that point, I was like a lot of kids at that age where it's like, your parents say you're good at science, so you should do this. You get labeled with a skill set. And so you're going to be a doctor. And then you start repeating it at parties because everybody seems to be into that. And so I think I had realized that I was into music and I had a level of musical ability that was different. I wouldn't say better, but different than some of the other kids that I knew. But I don't think I had a trajectory.
When I met you, you were really into music. There have obviously been certain kind of seminal moments that have moved you in a certain direction. And going into music, growing up as a first-generation kid is not it's a pretty courageous move to make with, a family that probably prioritizes education over everything.
Courageous is a really kind way of framing that. I would say even 15 to 17, I was like, oh no, this is the thing. this is the thing I'm going to do. I had no idea what I was doing. And so really it was more about the freedom of the general awkwardness that I feel in 98% of interactions or life in general. Some people call it a Black Larry David. Anyway, so by the time I hit 17, I'm like, this is the thing I'm going to do. I don't want to go to college. I want to be a musician. And my parents were like, no, you're not doing that. You're going to college. And so I was like, all right. So I went to college and I went to go study engineering, which I didn't want to study. And I even remember being, on the tour and being like, oh, they have a business program? I think I'd be interested in that. My parents were like, no, you're studying engineering. And my first year of school, I just remember sitting in chemistry classes and just thinking, oh my God, I need to focus. And it felt like elementary school all over again. And I'm just trying to turn down the stereo in my head that's playing all these music ideas. And I'm like, I need to be listening. And all of a sudden I look up, the class is over. And it's like, oh my God, this is not going to go well. My first year of college was horrible. Like, it was disastrous. And so the spring after the first year of college, and this is back when people would mail your grades to you.
Right.
So in my head, it's like I'm waiting for the bomb to arrive because the first semester didn't go well. And my parents were making all these sacrifices. There's all this guilt. It's, out of love. And then I'm like, ooh, this is really going to get bad. And so it coincided with my grandfather passing away, my dad's dad. And so you're talking about pivotal moments. So there was like a wake sort of thing. There's an African or Ghanaian tradition around this that we had at our house. And my dad is this brilliant guy, but also very stoic. And he had his own sort of journey through life. And so I feel like he learned to repress his emotions in a really elegant way, almost puritanical, if you will, waspian.
Yes.
So I've never seen him, besides anger, I'd never actually seen him express sadness. And so, the people have left and he's crying and I'm thinking that he's crying about my grandfather. I'm like, whoa, this is a pivotal moment. And he looks at me and he's just like, your sister was your mom's project. And look at how well your sister's doing. She was studying chemical engineering. She was doing great. And you were my project and I failed.
That's the grief.
Oh, no.
I don't know if it's the grief. No, I think he honestly thought he failed. And what feels like a really sad moment, and it was sad for probably like a month or two, or maybe it was a week, but whatever. I was like, oh, this is liberating. Because, you can't be your parents, but as a kid, you're trying to emulate them. And then something comes in that either shows you can do something better or they release you from it. That was the release moment where I was like, oh, well, I don't have to be you. If you failed, this is a clean slate. I can do whatever I want.
How did you shift that into a release moment and not just a shame spiral?
I'm sure there was definitely shame spiral within it, but there was a lot of, I'm going to call it hardcore Christianity. And Dana, if I'm getting this wrong or if this is offensive in any way,
no.
I feel, you being a minister, you're more like yacht rock Christianity compared to hashtag.
Right.
You can use that.
Right.
You're more of a Hall and Oates vibe,
Right.
As compared to like the Motorhead vibe.
Right.
That was like really kicking in, or Wu-Tang vibe, whatever, that was kicking in my household simultaneously. And so at that point, I'd experienced several variations of shame spirals, varietals, if you will. So at that point, you can only shame spiral so much, and so it was, I don't know, lucky. I don't know. Maybe it was tied to something I'd read or heard, but it was easy for me to be like, oh, well, then I'm free to go off and do this.
Yeah.
Which I think the click point for me was more like I'm not locked into this thing anymore.
Right.
Because it's failed. So when no one expects anything from you, that is the most magical moment. So then that's when I was like, this is the thing I was meant to do. I'm meant to be a musician. I'm going to do this.
It's fascinating to consider this moment of release for Kwaku. I think for many of us, we might interpret this seminal moment more negatively. But for Kwaku, He no longer found himself encumbered by his family's expectations. He had failed, and he didn't have to pretend any longer.
And he told us how this period in his life then turned into a second adolescence. Those are his words. He was back at school trying on a few different things, studying a mix of music, business, and PR. There was even a short stint in the military, and some time spent as a jingle singer, which actually turned out to be quite lucrative for him.
And he remembers vividly reading a music biography about Sting and how he talked about working in schools, which enabled him to take the summers off and work on his music. He found a job as a music teacher at a charter school, where he and Michelle later met as teachers.
It was this first foray into education that kickstarted a process of tapping into things that came quite naturally to him. These were the early days of Wi-Fi, and he found himself solving other people's problems as an informal IT person. So much of what he explored had to do with a natural curiosity that he just leaned into.
I was a music teacher, but I wouldn't see kids for large swaths of time. And so I did two things, which led to two jobs, but really it was leading to the same job. I became at points the de facto tech person, like, hey, this isn't working, but I'm in front of kids. Can you look at this? Because I can't get this to work. The other piece was being able, just the chatting with people.
Mm.
Like what I should have been doing was just like sitting in my room and prepping lessons. Maybe reading more books on how to teach music more effectively. But instead, I'd play guitar for a while, and then I'd maybe read the Times, and, at certain points of the year, I'd work on my taxes. And then after that, I'd be like, all right, well, what else is going on? And so the idea of being curious, like, well, what are you guys doing in here?
Mm.
Having had to sort of think about your trajectory in this way, how do you think about this notion of calling or vocation?
Okay. All right. So yeah. Okay. Are you guys familiar with the term shadow professions?
No.
And I don't know who shared this with me, but it's the idea that you have a thing that you're meant to do, but either you weren't exposed to it or, within society, it didn't quite make sense yet. People were project managers way before project managers existed. And people were product managers way before product needed to be managed and, in that official way. So what you do within whatever job or vocation you choose is you find ways to do that thing more within your job. So me, the last job I had, I worked at this independent school and I was the innovation director and I would do all this ed tech stuff, but I would focus on partnerships because that was the thing I leaned in. I leaned towards, or the thing that brought me the most joy, where it's like, yeah, we should be connected with this farm. This farm wants kids to visit. And it's really easy, or it's easier to, especially during a pandemic, create opportunities for kids to have experiences around learning when they're outdoors and connecting it to nature, and also biomimicry, but also storytelling, and also things that they understand. So I would lean towards partnerships a lot, or going to conferences and connecting with people and bringing people back to speak in classes. My thing was, how do I connect people and concepts? And I understood how to talk to a vendor or how to teach people how to use a piece of technology, but that wasn't the thing that really interested me. And so to your point, I would like to believe that we have these things that we are destined or called, or we have these things about us that lend itself to doing specific things. Currently I have this business where I help people connect with other people. And it is largely based upon being curious because it's not limited to a specific field. And so someone, I've someone that I'm talking to who's starting up a VC fund. I'm like, well, explain to me how this works. This is really interesting. And who do you need money from? And what does that mean? And who do you need to talk to? And how do you talk to people like that? All right, I know someone like that because all these years of just chatting with people, I had one coworker used to make fun of me because I'd bring up something like, oh, I have a friend who does this. And he'd be like, you have a friend who does everything. But all these years of chatting with people, I would always meet people who did things that were different than music or education or anything that I was doing. And I'd always want to talk to them, like, tell me more about what you do. And, which is kind of off-putting to some people, but I'm just genuinely curious because I'm constantly, which leads to the second thing, trying to make connections between things that don't necessarily feel like they should connect with each other,
I
whether
love
it
that.
be like a parable or an analogy or something.
Mhm.
It is easier in my head to think of things that way and to understand things that way.
Mhm.
And so simply put, the more I understand about a bunch of different things, the easier it is for me to understand how a lot of things work and how they're similar.
Mhm.
And so whether it's helping people think about strategy around how they scale something that they're trying to work on, a podcast, a VC fund, a nonprofit, and what are the ways that you can connect with people that are meaningful and unique to what you do. Two, all right, well, we're at this event. I'm going to go to this event with you. And I'm just going to randomly start talking to people because it's a compulsion that I have. And then as soon as they say a thing, I know it feels like a rash, like I needed to go talk to that person. And then as soon as they say something that feels like it connects in a way that they don't realize it connects, you need to come talk to this person because they do this also. You guys should chat.
Mhm.
And then the last piece is, well, why don't we just put together a huge gathering, whether it's like a happy hour or the thing that I prefer most, let's get a dinner together of 10 to 15 people. And then throughout that dinner, I'm going to pair each person with someone else because they've been chosen for a really specific reason, even if they don't see it.
Mhm.
Give them just enough to ideally incite the curiosity that I have for everyone, that they can have that curiosity between one another, where they're like, well, why does he want us to talk to each other? Well, I do this. Because it will happen. But if you are saying, you need to talk to this person because you do X and you do X, which I've tried to do a ton, that never works.
Right.
Because you're giving them the reason to shoot down. Well, I don't quite do that. Or that's different for this reason. But if you give people the ability to have ownership over the connection through their own curiosity, that usually yields something that's bigger than anything that I would have thought of in the first place.
High quality connections. That's a thing. And
Yeah.
that it requires a fearlessness. And I hear so much of that in your story, something I so admire. I love that fearlessness and how you connect people to one another, how you connect ideas that are seemingly unconnectable.
I think what you pointed to when you were talking about parables and metaphors is you excel in this kind of analogical thinking that you're able to. Did you ever read David Epstein's book Range?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love that book.
You have range. You have this ability to bring together seemingly unrelated domains and bring them together. It's just a really neat
Love
talent of yours. And it's,
Well, the other thing about that book is that you don't have to be an expert.
yeah.
It's really reaffirming to people who I don't view myself as an expert in anything.
Yeah.
Right.
But how long does it take, right? It takes this journey to finally realize, like, oh, I don't have to be an expert. This kind of weird talent that I have of matchmaking people actually leads to a source of revenue, right? Like a way for me to
Right.
sustain my family. Like that takes a while to figure out.
It's funny that you say that and I'm still figuring that out.
Yeah.
Because there's a part of me that's still trying to convince myself that this is valuable. Because I think all of us were raised, if something's valuable, you've worked really hard to hone that skill. It's not something that comes naturally to you, and it's not something that anybody else could do. It's something that you've worked hard to do, and some organization has stamped you with the approval saying you can do this. And, as we're talking about this, I'm thinking, I'm like, oh yeah, in college, I'd be at keg parties like, hey, have you met that guy? You guys should talk. So when I say it's a compulsion, it is to the point where I literally look at something that for years I would just do for free for my friends because this is how I engage with the world, and shifting to thinking about it as a business and, oh, I have to monetize this. I can't do this for free. I can't see this as solving a problem for someone immediately because, one, you have to feed your family. And two, it is very easy to fall into these relationships where people just expect this from you. And it's almost an extractive relationship.
That's right.
As opposed to like a give and take, And if you're fortunate enough, well, Dana, you're already there, where you're fortunate to have a friend like Michelle, where each time you talk to them, you're like, oh man, that's I'm going to take that. That is brilliant. Like every time I speak to Michelle, I feel like I've gotten something from her that I wouldn't have gotten any other way or in another context with another person.
Are you trying to
know,
say that I have an
and if I'm-
extractive relationship with Michelle, which is true. Very true.
Wrong. But I like where your humor's going. I love where your humor's going. No, but I know this might be a little off, the focus or whatever. But Dana, I'd be interested. How did you realize that your calling was to be a minister?
Yeah, for me, like my deepest desire is to witness in some way and maybe even be part of the transformation of an organization, of a community, or of an individual, right? And I love that I get to see that in my role as pastor. I get to see how that plays out in a church, right? Whether that's like selling a parcel of our land for affordable housing and getting a community to move through that process, or whether it's like sitting with somebody in their deepest grief and then seeing how their life shifts and moves and they find purpose and meaning out of that grief, right? For me, the through line is the same, whether it's an individual or an organization or a community, of being able to support, strengthen, help people find meaning through those moments of what I call transformation. The way I do it is in this role as pastor through a church. Yet I feel like I see that in a lot of places. And I also really like connecting to something deeper, more meaningful in life. And I see that everywhere. And it doesn't just have to be through Christianity. I could find that in a lot of ways.
Right. And Michelle, same question for you. Now it's my podcast.
I love this. Just thinking also about how Dana is, she has a very specific calling, but even now you're starting to realize that there are other ways to enact that calling. She's exploring coaching opportunities. She's getting some professional development around a specific approach to coaching and life coaching, right?
That's right.
And so it's neat. It's neat to see even though you have this really amazing foundation and this enormous kind of opus of work that you've been responsible for, you're also still
That's right.
exploring.
Yes.
And getting curious about another set of talents that you're not necessarily using right now in that way.
Well, it's also somewhat of what you all were saying. I feel like I use them for free, right? Like people call me and I offer support. And the coaching I found, I've just started this coach training, and I've realized like what I love doing is helping leaders and supporting people. And they could be leading in any way. Like a parent could be a leader. You could be leading in your PTO. You could be leading an organization. But man, is that so fascinating. And how do I support and kind of ask the right questions to get people to see their own resourcefulness, creativity, power. And so it's fun. I also have found what's, I think, attracting me to that more than anything is my job is so big and amorphous, and people's expectations of it can be anything from like Dana only works an hour on Sundays when she says things from the pulpit to like Dana leads this organization that has all these tentacles, and just people's expectations can be all over the place. And there's such clarity in the coaching relationship, and there's real definition around what that looks like, how it starts, how it ends, and what my role is in that. And I've realized like, what a gift and what freedom. I don't know if I would have felt that 20 years ago, but now after 20 years of professional ministry, I'm like, I'm very attracted to doing this work in a different format and developing that too.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
So that's actually a better question for you, Michelle. Do you find yourself craving the clarity of a specific direction? Because I enjoy things being amorphous because that, to me, that's freedom. And I'm not going to get bored. Do you prefer having that flexibility of being in an amorphous role, or would you prefer to have something that was more defined?
No, I love uncertainty. I love the amorphous quality of my work. I don't love having to explain my amorphous work to other people.
Yeah.
But the actual projects I get to engage in are fantastic. And I also love being behind the scenes and doing that kind of sense making through the chaos. Like that is the stuff I really, really love. It's just more that comfort of not having to explain myself at length with someone. That is the thing I don't love. And I wish there was a simpler way of explaining to people. People would ask me, so what do you do as a consultant? And I would say, good question.
Yeah.
Because it totally depends on the context and the circumstance and the problem they're trying to solve. But I love being able to engage in this way. So Kwaku, Now that we're
Yes, ma'am.
going back to our podcast.
Oh, are we hitting record now? Are we ready to start or? Oh, no, it's done. Oh, okay.
As you can tell, we had a lot of fun doing this interview. And yes, Kwaku ended up flipping the podcast interview on its head by interviewing us.
Yes, I was definitely not expecting to be talking as much during our interview of him.
But is it any surprise that his curiosity and his compulsion to learn more took over? There's a psychologist named Frank Barron who talks about curiosity, and he studied creative figures and saw that curiosity actually helps these people stay flexible, be more innovative, and actually be more persistent. And it's this unusual space to live in, this space of wonder. It's a kind of mixture of curiosity, uncertainty, discomfort, innovation, and problem solving. It's almost this kind of beautiful space, but it also can feel deeply uncomfortable to live in this space because we don't feel like we're an expert. We don't feel like we have control. We don't feel like we fully understand what's going on. And meanwhile, Kwaku is there authentically wanting to connect and learn more about others and really living into that uncomfortable space. And that's how he accelerates his own growth, both personally and professionally.
Throughout the interview, Kwaku alluded to this practice of chatting, which he's so good at. And chatting in the sense, though, of small, simple activity that's not just chit-chat or empty conversation about the weather, but a questioning that's motivated with real curiosity and the desire to learn and make more connections.
Yeah, it reminds me, when we were little, we used to ask questions all the time, right? We know that kids are born curious, and we've seen all these studies come out that show how little ones, whether they're 2 or 3 years old, they're asking a few hundred questions a day. And then over time, they've even measured that 10-year-olds only ask 1 to 2 questions per day, right? This kind of curiosity gets squelched out of us.
Yeah, we see it, Michelle, as we're both parents, and how curiosity is a natural and essential element of childhood development. And those questions reflect our own desire to make sense of the world around ourselves. But various researchers have argued that over time, school systems and social norms and parental attitudes train that curiosity out of us. But that's not the case for Kwaku. He shows us how to practice curiosity. He's out there asking questions and listening. His curiosity brings people together in novel ways and has ultimately led to a way for him to make a living on his own terms.
The same thing that got him in trouble as a child and made him feel trapped in his chemistry class in college is the same thing that has opened up this wide range of career pathways in a relatively short amount of time. She's Dana Walsh.
And she's Michelle Weise.
This has been another episode of A Life Worth Working. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends and loved ones who may also be searching for purpose and meaning in their work lives, or what we call the soul of work.